number one barrier for women to being active was this fear of being a fear of judgment, the fear of being too slow, of not knowing what you're doing, of being last, and all of those things which I think so many women can relate to.
Hello and welcome to the very first All Bristol Girls Can podcast. We're going to be talking about why Bristol Girls Cans exist and what people can do to get themselves active. I've been joined by Mel Bound from This Woman Runs, Lisa Woods from Wesport, and Alice Hall, who is a Bristol Girls Can ambassador and local connector. Yeah. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Podcast.
We've got big mics and everything.
Exactly. So, first off, This Girl Can. Tell me a bit more about the overarching campaign.
Yeah, well, This Girl Can, the national campaign, is 10 years next January. And it was established by Sport England in response to the really persistent inequalities between men and women when it comes to being physically active. And that's despite the millions of pounds that's been poured into the fitness industry and post-London 2012 Games. Those things were having no major difference on how active women were. And so Sport England did a bunch of work around digging into the emotional barriers and really understanding what it was that was getting in the way of women being more active. And what came out of that work was this, real light bulb moment that the number one barrier for women to being active was this fear of being a fear of judgment, the fear of being too slow, of not knowing what you're doing, of being last, and all of those things which I think so many women can relate to. Yeah. And from that insight, the This Girl Can campaign was born. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone who's seen the TV campaigns for This Girl Can would agree that the campaign nationally is a real celebration of real women and real women's lives, and digging into, what is actually going on in our worlds and what are the things that are getting in the way of us being active, but also what happens when we start to strip away that fear and some of those kind of more emotional barriers. Then anything becomes possible, and hopefully we can start to shift the needle on how active women are.
Amazing. And why do you think there was a necessity to make it more local and make a Bristol Girls Can campaign?
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, to take a national campaign but actually relate it to a local place. So we at Wesport are the local active partnership covering the West of England area, and the Bristol Girls Can local activation of the campaign started actually about 9 years ago. So it was formerly managed and led by the Bristol City Council, but in this past year we've taken it on as the active partnership, and it's so important to bring this back to a local area and really start to dig deep at what's unique about Bristol and what are the unique challenges that women and girls face here in our place. So through delivery this over this next 12 months, we've really looked at working with our local community organisations that know the women and girls out on the ground and can really understand the unique barriers to them being active. So the way we've approached it this year is we're dividing the campaign into three sort of unique areas. So firstly, we've looked at employing community connectors who are based in our local areas, who've got lived experience and can really draw out those unique barriers. And it's great to have Alice here who's going to talk a bit more about her work. We've also want to make sure that we're connecting across organisations across the whole of Bristol, because this is a Bristol-wide, it's a city-wide campaign, and we have some great organisations doing some amazing work, and we want to connect them better together. So we've been creating network opportunities, so that's a mixture of face-to-face meetings. We're also running some online webinars to talk about some of the real issues that are affecting women here across Bristol.
Amazing. And Alice, what's your part that you play?
So I learnt about Bristol Girls Can when I was in lockdown. I just had my first daughter and they were looking to hear mum's stories, and I was able to share my story about how I used to carry my baby in a sling and do workouts in my kitchen. But this is probably familiar for some people during lockdown. And that was part of something called the Small Steps campaign. And in the Small Steps campaign, it was about recognising that mums in particular are very active, but what we can do to take advantage of those little pockets throughout the day to do the little things that could make us more active. And actually, a lot of the people I spoke to then went on to be more active in general because they'd started small and they worked their way up. I now work for Bristol Girls Can as a connector role, which we were just talking about, and my job is to talk to the mums in my community and find out what they would really like to do to be more active, find out what they're doing already, and if there's a gap, what's causing that gap? Is there a barrier? Is it something they're doing that is it something stopping them from doing something? Is it a physical barrier? Is it a mental barrier? Or is it just there's nothing in place for them to do? There's also another lady who's doing a similar role, and she's working in a different area, and she's looking at that sort of target audience of teenage girls and working what we could do. So we're looking at quite different stages of women's lives and trying to cover a different approach to Bristol that way.
Okay, and what are you finding are the barriers? What is the general consensus?
So the general consensus for mums is time and where the children are. So how you can fit more activity into your day when you've also got children perhaps in your active space. You've got places to be, you've got many, many things to do. And it's a case of working out if there are any pockets of time that we can carve out, whether some people prefer to do it at home, whether some people actually need that community to get them out, get them doing things, to get more of a kind of sense of being. But also it's about thinking about what are the children going to be doing? Can they be joining in? Can they be somewhere safe so that the mums aren't worrying about them, so the mum can take some time out to enjoy it? And it's an interesting role. We're finding out lots of new things.
I think, Mel, you had an interesting perspective on this, didn't you, around just carving that 15 minutes out?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems as women is actually giving ourselves permission to take time for ourselves. Yeah. That feels quite challenging. And so a lot of the work we do with this women runs is starts with, actually, what about just taking 15 minutes that's just for you, that is not actually about even being active, because sometimes taking that first step to, I'm going to make time and it's for something active, is too big. So starting with, I'm going to take 15 minutes and I'm going to go to a cafe and read a book. When you say that to a woman that feels like she has no time, even that feels quite challenging initially. Yeah. So starting with the building habit of taking time helps with the next step of, okay, now I'm going to do something active, but I'm going to do that in a really low pressure way. So it's not about giving myself a massive target of running a marathon. It might be going for a 15-minute walk or going and doing a few lengths in the local swimming pool, something very low key and low pressure. Yeah. So it's definitely kind of, there's stages and steps to work through.
Like building blocks.
Absolutely, yeah. We talk about it as being like an incubator. So we kind of creating a space where we're really empowering women to think more about filling their own cup first and the different ways that they might do that. And that can feel really hard. Brilliant.
And what do you think, if you were a woman just trying to start getting into activity, doesn't even have to be a sport or, going to the gym. What is that first step you think they need to take?
Yeah, really good question. I think there's a lot of work still to be done nationally, actually, around misconceptions about what we mean by activity and exercise. Just the words themselves can mean different things to different people. And a lot of women have previously bad experience of being active. That can even stem from school PE back in those days. So I think there's a lot we need to do around reframing what we mean by being physically active. And actually, we use the term a lot in our organisation. It's just about movement. And I think if we focus on movement and about moving your body in a way that works for you. It doesn't have to cost anything. We know that women are more likely to be inactive, but actually we need to also think about some of the other demographics here as well. We know that people from low income are more likely to be inactive. Those who have got long-term health conditions, those who have a disability, and those from our culturally diverse communities. So we also need to think about sometimes some targeted work as well to make sure that we're addressing those unique barriers that they're experiencing, so we can break those down and actually enable them to be more active in a way that works for them.
So we've talked a lot about women and particularly mums getting, trying to get active, but it really does start from when they're a teen, doesn't it? And I know that you're not necessarily the connector for this, but you do a lot of work with the other connector, don't you?
Yeah, so my connector role is with mums, and that's quite clear that what I have to do. But then it was fascinating for me to learn about what Terry's role is, where she's working with teenage girls. They've got quite an amazing setup where they've got a girls' club and the girls come to them. And through that, they can teach them about healthy eating. They can teach them about being more active. And when I went to the Bristol Girls Can Network, I learned all about some of the other challenges, which I hadn't really thought about being a teenage girl. And actually, I found out quite a lot of it. There's been quite a lot of research going into that. So it'd be really nice to see how Bristol Girls Can work with this and make some changes for our communities.
And you know quite a bit about the research side of things, don't you, on this, Mel?
Yeah, we've recently done a piece of research with the guys at Bedford University looking at teenage girls specifically in that kind of year 7, year 8, so that transition from primary school into secondary school, which is a point in a girl's life where we know there's a huge drop off in terms of how physically active they are.
Yeah.
So we were really interested to understand that a little bit more, and look at some of the ways we might take the programs that we've been running with women, and make them relevant to girls. And so we ran a series of workshops, which I was lucky enough to be part of. And we dug into all sorts of things with a group of 12, 13 and 14-year-old girls about their lives, about their school lives, about their home lives, about anything they do in terms of being physically active, where they do it and the barriers that get in the way. And there was a lot of themes that came out of that research, which are things that we'd already understood through This Girl Can and other research. But I think the absolutely overriding, devastating thing for me actually to hear from these young women was around the lack of time for themselves and the lack of headspace that they have, even at that age. They already are feeling stressed, like they're juggling a lot of balls with their kind of school commitments, and a lot of them with kind of cultural, from kind of different cultural backgrounds that have those responsibilities at home as well. And what they shared with us was that they were really struggling with headspace, and that was having an impact on their mental health and how they felt about themselves. So what they were really looking for from a program that was about being active was about getting time back for themselves. And so we shared a little bit about the programs that we run with women, and we got them to provide their thoughts and feedback on that. And actually, the other thing that was really interesting to me was how interested they were in the kind of things that sit around the exercise program. So they wanted to understand about their bodies, about periods, about puberty, about how those things impact how they feel and how they feel about being active. So they wanted almost like a curriculum that sat around the walk run program that helped them to understand all of those things as they journey through puberty, and they can kind of think about those things alongside what they're being asked to do in terms of being physically active. So we'd like to run a pilot to test some of those to test some of those findings. I'm hoping that we might be able to do something with the Bristol Girls Can team. And watch this space.
So thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great first podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks for having us.
And if people want to get involved with the network or just get involved in activity, how can they get involved?
Yeah, great. So if anyone has been inspired by listening to this, either individual or as an organisation, then please head to our website, www.bristolgirlscan.co.uk. And there's lots more information on there, and you can sign up to be part of our network, which will mean that you'll get some information about the upcoming webinars.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
I think we did cover everything, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did.
My brain's gone now, so I hope so.